Check 1, 2. Little introduction, maybe.
See my pretty
The first
smiling face,
one.
you know. Had the weekly shower today, so.
Yeah, got it done. Yeah. Fancy.
You got soup, right?
Oh yeah, no, yeah. Pop in for that.
Well, what comment he did make in there that made really sense to me.
I hadn't changed my lock yet, that's when you know your time is up.
Doesn't work anymore. Yeah.
Well, I'm leaving. I've got to be in Athens tomorrow. I came down Saturday. My wife has been down for 2 weeks. I was down last weekend for my grandkids have been down for the long weekend. And I had to go back and do a little bit of work. And then I came back down Saturday morning. And then but I got to be in Athens tomorrow, so I'll be back up there. And then it'll probably be a couple weeks before I come back. I may come back for the Florida weekend. I just haven't really decided just yet. But this is October is just perfect. Perfect weather. Beautiful temperatures. I even got swimming yesterday. I probably my last outdoor swimming of the year. It was a little cool. So
Not a heated pool.
no, it's not a heated pool.
Yeah, it was cool yesterday.
It was a little overcast yesterday, but I had gone out to eat lunch and I had sort of cheated on my diet a little bit. I had a fish sandwich with French fries, and I said, you know what, I really got to have a good workout this afternoon. So I said, I'm going to jump in that pool. That's the best way for me to burn calories. Is swimming.
How long were you in the pool?
30 minutes.
Good workout in the pool.
I can do 1,000 yards in 30 minutes.
All right, that look.
Hi, Anna.
How are you?
Good. Oh, and thank you.
So much for that. Absolutely. Does that work for you?
Yeah, perfect.
You need the agendas too?
Yep. No, that was even more,
That was actually
included more stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, that was actually easier to file.
Dale, I'm the same way. Now, occasionally we'll do a 5K down here, but
That's great.
But I'm like this. If it wasn't the knees, it was the hips. If it wasn't the hips or the knees, it might be the ankles or something. So walking
Do we have anyone on the line?
I never ran on the beach. I rode them all. I'm on the beach, you go down, go around the life park, swimming in the dock, swimming in the road. I'm going down.
turn around right back into the winds. What
You got it, son. You
We
got
have
it.
Gale Association of
I like to
Educators.
dive.
Georgia Association of Educators. I've been going to that conference here since 1994. And we always have a beach run. And it's one of those down backs. And inevitably, you're going to have the wind at your back one way and then you turn out.
And I like to dive coming back. Then you stay busy, make a bunch of money.
Hello?
Hello, sir. You're live in the room. We're a few more minutes until the meeting starts.
Just hang with us. Joel will be right here.
Good morning, this is Bob Kruger.
Hey, Bob.
You're live in the room. We're a couple of minutes before we start the meeting.
Hello?
Hello, sir. You're live in the room. We'll be starting the meeting shortly.
Bob?
Yeah,
Hey, it's Mark. I'm on, but I can't. I think it's just me and you right now.
I think so too, Mark. How you doing this morning?
Good.
Sir, can you hear me?
Doing deer hunting over the weekend?
Nah,
Commissioner Williams?
busy. My youngest daughter's getting
I
married.
can't hear.
All kind of honeydews.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
You got butt going.
Now that we got cool air, cool weather, I'm more apt to go. I'm not one of
Yeah,
them
you and
that
me both.
get out there and sweat.
Swat mosquitoes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm showing 9:31.
Let them get this
I heard
straight.
somebody else come on, I thought.
Right now.
Okay. Let 'em fix
Good
that.
morning, it's Glenn. How are y'all?
Hey,
Hey,
Glenn,
Glenn.
well,
I'm sorry, I had a trip pop up, so I'm driving, so I'll try to keep it on mute, until I need to vote or something. How's everybody?
Mr. Willard? Mr. Willard?
Doing well, hope you are.
Yes, sir.
we
Love
met
this
a guy.
weather.
We met a guy at the Athens Airport. We landed for the Arkansas game. I flew up there with Delbert.
Good thing you
Fly,
say we met a guy at the cheetah.
Oh, yeah,
Knew
yep.
you
Okay.
from Gulfstream. He was with a group of people. He may have been their pilot or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I've got.
Gentlemen, can you hear us?
I usually check with him on his birthday.
Mr. Kruger,
Yeah.
can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Can you hear us?
Oh, yeah, good, fine.
Great. We're live in the room.
Commissioner Williams, can you hear us?
Yes.
Mr. Willard?
Yes.
Okay, Judge, you want to start?
Okay, yeah, I do. It's 9:31. And this is done 9:33, Tuesday, October 19th. And I'm going to call the meeting to order. And we will do, Anna, call the roll, please.
Yes, sir. Mr. Joseph B. Wilkinson, Jr.
Here.
Mr. Bob Kruger.
Here.
Mr. Bill Gross.
Here.
Commissioner Mark Williams.
Here.
Ms. Joy Birch Meeks. Not currently present. Mr. Tripp Tollison. Not currently present. Dr. Buster Evans.
Here.
Mr. Glenn Willard.
Here.
Mr. Dale Atkins.
Here.
Sir, you have a quorum.
Great, thank you. There was one public comment received online for this meeting. It was from Craig Patterson regarding the master plan. All right, we're going to go to the Historic Preservation and Conservation Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I'll call on Michelle to give us an update on the AmeriCorps membership update, and followed by Ben and Joseph on the Eastern Diamondback Rattlesnake long-term monitoring. So, take it away.
Good morning, Board. Can you hear me? For the past 12 years, the Jekyll Island Authority has gained support from the Georgia Department of Community Affairs with the AmeriCorps program. Since 2009, we have welcomed over 298 members serving in AmeriCorps from 39 states. With approximately those amount of members, we have served over 423,000 hours. And this is all supporting the Jekyll Island Authority and Georgia Sea Turtle Center program. Within our 13th year, which we're welcoming now, I wanted to take this opportunity to welcome and introduce you all to Lauren Pacheco, who is our AmeriCorps and Volunteer Programs Manager. And she would like to introduce you to our current AmeriCorps members.
Thanks, Michelle. Hello, I'm Lauren Pacheco. I am the AmeriCorps Program Manager. And as Michelle stated, I'd like to introduce you to our current set of 16 AmeriCorps members. They'll stand after I read their names. In the Conservation Department from Georgia, we have Morgan Pierce. Forgive me, I probably won't look back after everyone. From New York, we have Charlotte Bernard, also in Conservation. Of Texas, Audrey Naughton with our Conservation Department. In our Education Department at the Georgia Sea Turtle Center this year, we have 4 members. Kelsey Abernathy of Georgia. Ainsley Bright of Colorado. Jessica Ney of Massachusetts. And Garrett Moretta of California. Not present today, we have Molly Albright with Husbandry, but our other husbandry members in the Georgia Sea Turtle Center are Claire Bolster of Maryland, McKenna Butler, Arkansas, Hannah Imhoff of Maryland, Mackenzie Carr of New Hampshire, Claire Temple of Georgia, and George Bancroft, Massachusetts. And this fall we have 2 research members with our team, Will Hicks from Georgia and Libby Sutton of Florida.
Great. So good to see all of you, and thank you.
Thank you for taking the time, everybody.
Absolutely.
Good morning. It's my pleasure this morning to introduce a presentation by Mr. Joseph Colbert. Joseph is our wildlife biologist for the Jekyll Island Authority, and I've always particularly admired Joseph's record of national service. He's a Marine Corps veteran, and it's appropriate following the AmeriCorps presentation to point out that Joseph first came to us through the AmeriCorps program here way back in 2011. And later, during his graduate studies at the University of Georgia, was recognized as with the prestigious honor of being a Tillman Scholar, and then rejoined us here on staff to be our wildlife manager and now wildlife biologist. And all through this time, Joseph has been guiding and leading our efforts to learn more about the eastern diamondback rattlesnake population on the island. And that work is now going on a 10-year body of work. And I know that snakes are not always everyone's favorite topic, but I think it's important to share this work with you because the authority has been supporting this for going on 10 years. And I do believe it's some of the more groundbreaking and novel and impactful conservation work that we do. And it's definitely among the more physically challenging work that we do. So I'm delighted to have Joseph tell you all more about it this morning. Thank you.
Okay, can everybody hear me okay? Yep. All right. Like Ben said, we started this program in 2011, so we hit a major milestone last month, and we're celebrating our 10-year anniversary, which makes us technically a long-term ecological research monitoring program. It's a milestone that a lot of other agencies do not hit. They don't have the time or bandwidth to, be involved in the study that long. Thus far, we've collected over 7,300 unique locations on 48 individual rattlesnakes. That's pretty big. And as you can see in our images over here, our main way of radio tracking these snakes is to insert a transmitter in them, and then we go out and find them with equipment, telemetry equipment. And you can kind of see where that little transmitter is inserted in that one. And we use this equipment right here, and we go out and find them in the wild. The research that we're doing here is extremely novel, and like Ben said, and what I really want to do is kind of portray to you why it's important to us here on Jekyll. The rattlesnake faces threats that some other species don't face: widespread human persecution, widespread habitat loss, and fragmentation in roads. So there's a lot of things that are working against them. The biodiversity reasons, we have a mandate in our conservation plan to preserve, maintain, and protect natural biodiversity and enhance it to the best of our ability. You know, the idea here is to try to see that this biodiversity persists for, you know, time to come, so people on Jekyll can continue to enjoy it. The eastern diamondback rattlesnake was petitioned for listing under the Endangered Species Act. That was through the Fish and Wildlife Service. They have yet to make a decision because they do not have enough information. Not very many programs are out there supplying information like that. They are a predator, which also means that they're an umbrella species. And by that I mean that by looking at them and managing for them, we're managing for a lot of things that kind of fall under them in that food pyramid. So if you think about a top predator that relies on a certain amount of mammals that require a certain amount of plants and space, we're managing for all those things when we're managing for these rattlesnakes. And predators are also the first thing that disappears around people oftentimes. Again, like Ben said, it's not everybody's favorite animal, so there are human concerns. You know, some people feel pretty strongly about not having them around, or maybe they just want to know what's going on and see if they can feel comfortable around them. Another reason to continue doing that research. Here on Jekyll, they are an island population, meaning that they're separated from the mainland. It's not like a bird that can fly from one place to the next. There's a lot of challenges for them to go from, you know, point A to point B if they want to exchange genetics from here to the mainland. And again, because they're that umbrella species, they inform our management. By doing research with them and doing management around them where we have been doing research, we can see how that management actually impacts the species negatively or positively. And most importantly, this is an extremely novel subject of study. Again, programs like these aren't taking place. Even like the Fish and Wildlife Service, they don't really have like the emotional and mental strength to do these kind of research projects. You know, I have to credit our AmeriCorps program and, you know, the individuals in our conservation department, support from the Georgia Sea Turtle Center. It's been one of the driving reasons why I've been able to continue this study. One of the first novel things that I want to present to y'all is that Jekyll Island is a very characteristically and genetically unique, distinct population of its own. They are, again, separated from the mainland, and there must be some kind of resistance between exchanging genetics. So this image up here, you see there's this kind of like green cluster of points and this red cluster of points. So this green cluster of points represents this broad western population of rattlesnakes, and this red side represents this eastern population. And Jekyll Island stands alone. It's actually very far separate from those two populations, so they must have been isolated here for quite some time. That was one of the most novel and interesting things we discovered early on. And just so you know, there are other islands that identify with the eastern population. So Sapelo Island north of us and Paris Island north of us identify with that eastern population. So there's some connection between those islands and the mainland, but we don't have that here. So because of that, one of the first things we wanted to do was learn about the population. So we had to do this pretty grueling study. So and nobody probably can see this here, but in this little image here, we got a couple people walking around this big area, and they're looking for rattlesnakes. What we had to do is actually go out and look for rattlesnakes that we radio track. So I had two people go out and look for snakes after one person set up a plot, and those two people didn't know where that snake was. And in order to really make population estimates, we have to know how often we can find a snake versus how often we don't find a snake. Without that information, we cannot make population estimates. We can only guess. And we randomly assigned that snake a location in the plot. They went out and found him, and we figured out what our detection probabilities were. And then we kind of formed these little grid squares across the island that were about a couple acres each, and we surveyed those areas randomly. And we found there to be, just on the south end of the island, where you can see this this image here, we found there to be about 64 adults in 2020 and 61 adults in 2021. Based on what I've seen for the north end of the island, I don't think there's more than 30 adults up there, so I would say that the entire population on Jekyll Island depends on 100 adults or less. So now we know they're genetically disconnected from the mainland and that there's a small population. At this point, we're kind of thinking about them like an endangered species. You know, we're concerned about what's going on with rattlesnakes here, and again, trying to find out as much as we can to manage for them the best way possible. One of the questions I get asked a lot is, what kind of habitats do they use? Do I expect to find them in my yard? The answer is really no. See, there's a development layer right there next to this image where we have the points. And the reason I wanted to show you these side by side so you can see those green spaces are really populated with the points that we are actually seeing our radio snakes use, our radio track snakes use. So essentially they're using those green spaces. They're using that 2/3, space left behind for wildlife here on Jekyll, to prosper and survive. So I'm gonna show you what that looks like combined. So essentially they're pretty much populating almost all the green spaces that are left behind outside of development. And we do have evidence that they avoid development, that they are using marsh, dune, and forest. But when we look at points overlapping in development, it's a few to none. We've only actually had 31 road crossings in the last 10 years with those 48 snakes and those 7,300 points we've collected. By 8 snakes only, and 3 of them were actually hit on the road. So it's not a very safe endeavor for them. What it really is that they like dense vegetation, they like cover, and they just don't like going into open spaces. That's kind of what we've documented with our data. And we don't really expect to see them out in lawns, on the soccer field, out in people's yards or anything like that, because that grass is pretty well cut and mowed. It's really where that dense vegetation is that they're sticking around to. So. One of the really cool things we did recently with support from the Jekyll Island Foundation and collaboration with the Georgia Sea Turtle Center was a health study. You would think that we would understand more about what's going on with their health, but we don't. So we don't even know what baseline values are. Just like when we go to the doctor to get a checkup, we have this range of values that you would expect to fall in. Either you're going to be high or low or something like that. And we don't have any of that information for eastern diamondback rattlesnakes. So we found that information. And one of the cool incidental findings we found when we did that was that there are certain blood chemistry values that we can use to predict pregnancy in rattlesnakes up to a year out. That was pretty interesting, and we're getting ready to publish a big paper about that because it really could apply to other reptile species as well. Female reproduction is rather low. What I kind of want to explain to you, what you're looking at here, is that in this blue column, you're seeing how many snakes are in the study in a given year and how many reproduction events we're seeing in a given year. And it kind of averages out to be just pretty close to 8 every 8 years that we're seeing one individual snake reproduce. And it's 1 out of 8 snakes in a given year that we're seeing reproduce. So these snakes hit sexual maturity at about 4 to 5 years, and they're probably living on average for about 12 years on the island. More data to come, to confirm that. But essentially what I'm getting at here is they're probably only reproducing once in their lifetime, unless they're exceptional, maybe twice. So really we need those females to survive, as long as possible to really support that population. A lot of folks ask us how much they eat or what they're eating. They're really not eating a whole lot. This is annual average meals by habitat. So what we're seeing here is that snakes that are in the forest are eating about 1 large meal a year. Once these snakes hit about 3 foot, they're only eating rabbits after that, except for two situations we did document an individual eating a raccoon. So you could see those kind of little arms and legs there. That's pretty impressive. So that one was actually a little over 5 foot. But generally we're seeing them eat 1 to maybe on a good year 2 rabbits each year, and it does kind of vary between habitat. Survival does vary a little bit. We see some years are really high survival, some years it's lower. And again, thinking about reproduction and what kind of things they're up against, we like to see high survival. But yeah, there are a few human-caused mortalities, a few road, strikes, and a few individuals that have been, persecuted by people. But for the most part, we're seeing a lot of natural death in the wild, which is a good thing. So research has been a gateway to community interest. A lot of folks ask us about their favorite rattlesnake. A lot of people want to know what's going on with the snakes, and we get to talk to the community a lot. A study about iconic species identified sea turtles and live oaks as kind of one of the primary iconic species, but rattlesnakes were mentioned often, and they were surprised by that. And that definitely has to do with our research program here. Our unique rattlesnakes, they are our Jekyll Island rattlesnakes, are living alongside humans in our sustainably developed community, which is definitely a good thing. And we are in the process of publishing several papers about our novel research program here, and I think that our data will assist not only us, but other wildlife agencies that seek out that kind of information and aren't gathering it themselves. And this is a long-term ecological research study now, so we are seeking more collaborations and more financial support. And we're extremely novel and groundbreaking in so many categories, it's kind of crazy. It's really awesome to be able to do this kind of research in a place like this. We definitely have our senior leadership and our board to thank for the support we get to do something like this. Again, most agencies aren't even doing these kind of programs, so we really stand out, and we have a lot of people seek us out to ask questions, to get information, and to interpret our data. And if you have any questions about this one, another novel and another Jekyll first, this is a canebrake eastern diamondback rattlesnake hybrid. It's only the third time it's ever been documented in the literature, and it's the first time anybody's ever tracked one of these, so we're keeping tabs on this one. And if anybody has any questions, if I have time, I'd be glad to answer them.
Do you have much population for gopher tortoise here on the island?
We do not have gopher tortoises on the island.
How about indigo snakes?
We do not have indigo snakes on the island either. Okay. So the eastern diamondback rattlesnake's kind of standing alone and making its way without those species it's associated with inland.
Good.
Dale, anything else?
Any other questions? Thank you, staff, and Mr. Chairman, that concludes our report.
Okay, we're now going to open the floor for any public
Thank you very
comments.
much.
And public comments are limited to 3 minutes for each person. Any public comments? Okay, then I will move on to the Finance Committee. And,
Sir, before you move on, I'd like to check and see who we have on the line.
Okay.
I believe we had some people join. Ms. Birch Meeks, are you on the line? Mr. Tripp Tollison? Ms. Birch Meeks, did you join us? Or Mr. Tollison?
Yes, I did.
All right, thank you. Mr. Tollison is not on the line. All right. Continue. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So the record needs to indicate. Take care of that. Thank you. Go to the Finance Committee and Mr. Gross.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've been very fortunate to enjoy some beautiful weather here on Jekyll Island, and the financial numbers show that. So the September financial revenues were $2,749,038, which is $528,000 more than the budgeted for the month. Year-to-date revenues reflect a favorable $1.9 million variance from budget and a favorable $3 million variance from prior year to date. The areas with the largest variances from budget were both the hotel motel taxes, which were $177,000, and business leases, which were $114,000, significantly higher than budget for the month. September hotel taxes and percentage rent revenues are based on revenues received by the hotels and businesses in August. Golf revenues were $55,000 better than budget for the month. Weather was also favorable for golf. Tournament fees, golf card sales, and memberships were all higher than budget. Campground revenues were $55,000 better than budget for September. Camping continues to remain a popular outdoor activity in the midst of the pandemic. Campground year-to-date revenues are $112,000 better than year-to-date budget. Expenses for September were $1,978,719, which is $192,000 or 9% less than budget for the month. Year-to-date expenses were $662,000 less than budget and $1 million more than prior year-to-date expenses. The largest expense variances for the month were human resources, $110,000 under due to vacant positions, both full-time and part-time. Repairs, facilities and grounds were $30,000 less than budget, and contracts $36,000 less than budgets. Both are, they're soon to be timing related variances since it's still early in the fiscal year. Net operating cash for September is $770,319, which is $720,000 better than a budget net operating income of $50,363. Year-to-date net operating cash income is $2.6 million better than budget and $2 million better than prior year-to-date income. September traffic stats. Total traffic count for September was 106,768 vehicles, which is 6,051 more vehicles than September of 2020. Year-to-date traffic count, 1,151,741 vehicles, which is 311,543 vehicles more than the prior calendar year to date. Hotel stats. September revenues reported by the hotels were $4.6 million, which is $1 million more than September 2020. Occupancy rate was 59.3, which is up from 58.6. Revenue per available room was $114.84, which is up from $105.52 in September 2020. ADR, average daily rate, $193.70, which is up from $180.11. Calendar year 2021. Year-to-date revenues reported by the hotels is $48.3 million, which is $18.9 million more than year-to-date 2020 revenues. Occupancy rate, 68.4%, which is up from 58.2%. Revenue per available room, $145.64, which is up from $101.40 year-to-date 2020. Average daily rate, $212.92, which is up from $174.17. Those are the stats for the financials. I think Marjorie has something she wants to update us on regarding a correction from the hotel stats for June through August. So I'll ask her to come up to the podium and give us an update at this time.
Good morning. In your board package, you have received some corrections for the June, July, and August hotel stats. I received a call at the end of last month from the Courtyard Marriott property that they had found some errors in the information they had reported to us. Mainly in the way they were calculating the number of rooms occupied and the number of rooms available. The net result of these corrections wasn't very big, but since we had already presented these to you, I wanted to make you aware of those changes. On a year-to-date basis, the revenues changed from $43.76 million to $43.78 million, which was an increase of $18,360. The occupancy rate changed from 70.3% to 69.7%, which is a decrease of 0.6%. The revenue per available room changed from $150.40 to $149.86, or a decrease of 54 cents per room. And the average daily rate changed from $213.83 to $215.16, or an increase of $1.33. So it's not a lot of change, but we just wanted to make y'all aware of that since they were included in the board packets. If you have any questions or anything, I'll be glad to answer that.
So Marjorie, the September report then, does it reflect those changes?
It does. Yes.
Very good.
Yep.
Thank you, Marjorie.
All right, I have one other update if you don't mind me taking just
Absolutely.
a second.
Yes.
As you may recall, in our budget meeting in June, we discussed executive staff development and succession planning, which is one of our goals for the year, and looking at all of our staff and trying to figure out, a succession plan. And one of those steps in that process was to hire an accounting director to come in and help me and learn everything that I do so that we'll plan for the future there. And I'm happy to tell you we have hired somebody for that position. Chandler, if you'll stand up. Chandler Bennett started working for JIA on October 1st, so he's a fresh face in the crowd here. And he comes to us from the Georgia Department of Audits and Accounts, from the Macon office where he served for 6 years. He also worked in a public accounting practice and has his CPA license. He has a bachelor's degree in political science, a bachelor's degree in accounting, and a master's degree in public administration, all from Valdosta State University. And he's only been here a couple of weeks, but he's already jumped in and is helping out, and I'm extremely happy he's here, so just wanted to
Welcome.
let y'all know who he was.
Welcome. Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you.
Well,
That's all I have.
well,
unless
thank
have some
you.
questions.
Bill, anything else?
Any questions of Marjorie or? Mr. Chairman, that concludes the finance report for today.
Thank you. We'll open the floor for any public comments. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes for each person. Any public comments? Okay, then I will move on and go to Dr. Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We would at this time like to call on our Director of Human Resources, Jenna Johnson, to come forward while we honor one of our employees who has made the decision to have a transition in life into the world of retirement. Jenna?
Thank you. I know, every time we do this, it melts my heart a little bit, right? We do have a quick retirement presentation for you this morning. Dennis Powell. He has been with us for 10 years of full-time service, and I think he might have spent a couple of years doing some part-time service even before then. And he is with our water and wastewater department, so I would like to invite Alan Thurston up to just say just a few words. He is our water and wastewater superintendent.
As Jenna said, Dennis has worked for us for 10.5 years. He's had key roles in the water and wastewater departments, and he's been a dedicated employee, and I'd like to wish him the best in his retirement. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank everybody.
Yep. Photo will come to you. Right back here. Perfect, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes the information coming from our Human Resources Committee this month. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a public comment. Again, the 3 minutes. I will go to the Marketing Committee, and Joy Birchmeeks chairs that. Can you hear me?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, sir. This morning, we're going to have an update from Alexa from our marketing committee. As Mr. Gray stated, we've been enjoying some beautiful weather, and we hope that it holds as we head into an even busier season of seasonal events. Alexa?
Thank you, Joy. So I wanted to give a quick update on some happening special programs and events that are happening in the month of October. Many of these are annual events and activities, so you're probably very familiar with them. One of them, the Polk Cup Classic. We're very excited to be bringing back the new golf tournament that we rolled out last year in honor of Johnny Polk. So this will be the second annual Polk Cup Classic. It'll take place October 27th and through the 29th at the golf club.
And this really is, a tournament that's in dedication of Johnny and his legacy here on Jekyll. So hopefully you all will be joining us for that. We also have at the Mosaic Jekyll Island Museum the seasonal Macabre Tales Ghost Tours. So these are our kind of seasonal, after dark, get to see the historic district in a new way to really understand kind of the supernatural side of Jekyll. It's a fun experience for families, and these are very popular. So if you're interested in taking a ghost tour, I definitely recommend booking a ticket because they will sell out. Film productions, I wanted to give a quick update. We, this past Saturday, had a production here on Jekyll at Driftwood Beach. It's a Disney Searchlight production titled The Menu. There was approximately 150 cast and crew members here on the island. They were here just for the day on Saturday. So, I think if you work or you live on Jekyll, you may have seen some of those cast and crew members, but relatively low impact. But I wanted to give an update kind of how what our process looks like for film productions such as this. Each year we probably receive around 25 film applications, and that's not including ones that may come to us directly from the state or directly from the CVB. But we do evaluate every film application, and it's really through a collaborative effort with many of our partners, including the Department of Natural Resources, Georgia State Patrol, our public safety team, our hotels, and our businesses. And after that evaluation process, based on kind of what they're looking to do, we also look at many of the factors of what or how the island might be impacted. So, what does the wildlife impact look like? What's the visitor impact in terms of seasonality? Where they're looking to film, what's the crowd's, the crowd or capacity situation going to look like, and then economic impact, as well as resources. So if they need fencing, or they need barricades, or they need trash, different reasons why the JIA might also need to provide resources to them. Those are all things that we look at and evaluate, ultimately we only end up seeing about 2 to 3 of those projects actually move to production on the island. And that's important because it, based on the number that we receive every year, not all of them meet really the expectations that we, the Jekyll Island Authority, have for productions, because we want to make sure that resource impact and wildlife impact is minimal. And this production, with them being on Driftwood Beach, one of the requirements that we had in conjunction with DNR was that film production had to end at sunset because we are still in turtle nesting season and our beach lighting ordinance is still active. Also, we are coming up on the 75th anniversary of Jekyll Island State Park. Most people may not realize that yet, but we have had several conversations internally over the last several months kind of in preparation. Jekyll Island was established as a state park by the state of Georgia in 1947. It was purchased and it opened to the island opened to the public in 1948. So when we come up to 2022, we will be celebrating 75 years. And with that, we certainly want to make that a year-long celebration, recognizing the island and its impact to the state of Georgia and the citizens of Georgia. So one of the activities that we're looking to roll out is sort of a kickoff event. It's going to be called the 75th Soiree, a spectacular celebration of 75 years as Jekyll Island State Park. It will take place Friday, January 28th at the Jekyll Island Club Resort. It's going to include dinner, dancing, one-of-a-kind entertainment, a little bit of a sneak peek there with some imagery, but certainly a once-in-a-lifetime event. We're very excited about this, and it was built around the idea that when the island opened to the citizens of Georgia, it began with a dinner in the grand dining room at the Jekyll Island Club Resort. So it's sort of bringing it back to the original moment when citizens were able to experience Jekyll, and it was no longer a private playground. So this event, like I said, it'll be sort of the kickoff event. We'll be inviting several state dignitaries, local civic clubs. We'll be inviting just many of our hotels, island businesses, ownership. So lots of invitations will go out for this event, but it is open to the public. It will be limited due to spacing, but we will have tickets available for sale, and we hope that, we have a lot of exciting things planned for that, so we hope that those people that are able to experience it enjoy it. And then with that, we'll be moving into, as I said, a year of celebration. So we have a lot of events and activities planned, some of which include a Beach Village block party. We'll be inviting the Georgia Sandman here to do a really exciting sculpture on the beach. We'll be doing some branded signage and wall murals. We have some new programming and exhibitry that we'll be rolling out at Mosaic, as well as some limited edition merchandise, and a lot of other exciting things that are still in the works. So I didn't want to reveal too much, but just something to give you all a taste of what's to come for 75 years. So I hope you'll be excited about that, and like I said, next year will be a really fun year to celebrate.
That's great.
And that concludes my report.
Do we have anything else?
Thank you, Alexa. Thanks for the preview ahead. We're looking forward to all of those events. Mr. Chairman, unless there are any questions, that concludes our report for marketing.
Thank you. Open the floor for any public comments. All righty. We have no report on the legislative committee, and I will go into the committee of the whole and a report with from Jones Hooks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This morning, we're delighted to have a marketing analysis report for you. I want to give board members and the public a little context here, a little memory, because I suppose that Bob Kruger is the only board member and one of about two or three, I think there's only 2 or 3 staff members that would remember all of the details here. But right before I actually started with the authority, there had been, in the original revitalization plans, there was a company out of Dallas, Texas called Trammell Crow that had actually purchased the lease of the old Buccaneer Hotel site and the parcels adjacent. And that they had purchased that out of bankruptcy in 2005. So this goes back many, many years ago. And they had proposed to build 3 hotels with 535 rooms. There is a slide that we have this morning that unfortunately I was the responsible party for getting it out of order, so don't blame this one on Anna. It's in there somewhere, Anna.
We're coming up on it.
Oh, back, man. Yeah. If you look at this slide, and we've also put in your blue folders, members of the board, this slide. But basically, if you look at the top of this, this was the original site as far as 3 parcels that I just mentioned that Trammell Crow controlled and proposed. And then over time, we know that Trammell Crow went away, and actually in 2015, LNWA actually purchased the lease from Trammell Crow. And then there were additional discussions with LNWA, Dave Curtis, and some changes were made in that LNWA donated land back to the authority that resulted in actually a reconfiguration of the sites. And if you look at the bottom of this slide, you'll see that there was it was divided then basically into 2 parcels. Parcel 1, which is now the site of the Marriott Courtyard Residence Inn, and then Parcel 2. And what's interesting about parcel 2 is that in some discussion with Dave, he and I reached an agreement where LNWA actually donated land back to the authority, 2.771 acres for conservation areas, which also then serve as buffer areas. And if you look at, Anna, if you'll go to the next slide, if you look at this slide, and I may walk over here because it's in your packets, but on the screen it's sideways. So I'm gonna make sure we get this right. If you look at the bottom of the slide, which would be the southernmost part, that today is where the Hampton Inn is. And then if you look at item number 2 or parcel number 2, that is Ocean Oaks. Hampton Inn and Ocean Oaks would be 1 and 2. And then you go on further, and number 3 is where the Courtyard Residence Inn is. And then the 2 parcels that I mentioned as far as the conservation areas would be these green sites on the southern part of what is now 4 and 5 and the northern part. So 4 and 5 was combined to become a future site for development. This is not anything new, like I said, because this has been pending since about 2005. The total acreage of that combined site is approximately 6.8 acres. Then in 17, after LNWA had purchased the site from Trammell Crow, in 17 we did a ground lease revised and restated with LNWA, and there were a couple of things that were very important in here, and that brings us to today. Not only was there some structuring as far as the amount of carrying costs that LNWA would pay to the authority, which they have been doing since this time, but also there was a requirement in the new lease that said that the lease would be revised to require the lessee to retain a consultant in the hospitality field subject to the lessor's approval, that is the authority's approval, and then it was originally by November the 19th, 2019, but then that date was revised to be 2020 to conduct a marketing study analysis relating to the permitted use of the premises. And then there was a section that the study, once complete, would require the lessee to deliver by November the 15th of 2021 a marketing study analysis to the board for its consideration. So that's where we are today. And I'd like to introduce to you the co-managing partner, someone who you definitely know from LNWA. Dave Curtis is here today, who will introduce the consultant who has conducted this particular study. Dave, welcome.
Thank you, Jones, and thank you for that history lesson. There's been a lot transpired, and it's often difficult to keep track of it all, so you did a very good job, and I appreciate that very much. I'm very glad to be here today, partly because I'm back home, and the weather is really nice. It's much nicer than it's been in upstate New York, so it's great to be back in the Golden Isles. As Jones said, you know, this property has been under consideration for quite some time, and we've been obligated to engage a market analyst. We chose RCLCO because we feel that they are, actually the gold standard in the business, and I'm going to introduce Carl Pitschke in just a moment. But just going back in a little bit further history lesson, of course, my company, along with Vance Hughes and Kevin Runner and others, restored the Jekyll Club way back in 1985, which seems like an age ago, and throughout the years have been involved in a myriad of hotel projects as well as some residential projects with my partner Gary Wadston. And it sort of brings us to today and the last, sort of the last parcel, which is interesting, and I think that in a way we've saved the best for last. This is a very unique parcel, and I just want everybody to know, the board and everybody in attendance, that we are absolutely committed and devoted to developing this parcel and making it as special for Jekyll Island as Jekyll Island is in of itself. I enjoyed Mr. Colbert's presentation. I've always known that Jekyll is a very unique place that we all love, but I didn't know that we had our own unique rattlesnakes. That's that was quite a discovery. So we engaged RCLCO, as I've said, and Carl, who's here with us today, is going to make his presentation and study, and it's not a typical market study. It's not, what's the highest and best use for this land. It really is, and we've done it in coordination with the authority, their input, a lot of stakeholders. It's what's the best fit for this last remaining piece of developable oceanfront property on Jekyll Island. So with that, I'm going to introduce Carl, and after his presentation, we'll be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm excited to be here today. As Dave mentioned, greatly enjoyed Mr. Colbert's presentation, but I'm happy to say that our research did not involve hunting down rattlesnakes, so no danger there. My name is Carl Pitschke. I'm a vice president at RCLCO Real Estate Consultants. As a bit of background, RCLCO is a real estate market research and data analytics firm. We've been operating since 1967, and our reason for being is really to provide objective real estate information and strategic solutions for our clients related to their real estate questions and challenges. And so we leverage an experienced team, quantitative analytics, and a proven methodological framework to help provide those solutions. We were engaged by LNWA in conjunction with the Jekyll Island Authority to conduct the analysis of the almost 6.9 acre former Buccaneer site adjacent to the Days Inn and Marriott Courtyard and Residence Inns. Our study was really meant to address a number of key objectives, beginning with an assessment of the site itself, and perhaps most critically, seeking to evaluate and determine the market feasibility and potential for either residential or hospitality uses based on the best fit of the site. And in addition to that, we understood from the outset that this is obviously a very special and unique location, a special site, as well as a special location on Jekyll Island, being a state park subject to restrictions on development, sensitive to environmental and ecological concerns and capacity considerations, and also being a place that occupies such an important place in the lives of so many people, both residents and visitors. We understood that whatever the market findings for this site we needed to understand what the context of that would be to the many stakeholders for Jekyll Island. And so as part of this process, we also conducted extensive interviews with a number of folks, which I'll touch on later in this presentation. So the slides that I'll walk through today are just a brief summary of the much larger market report that I believe you've all been given. So to start off, the site, just in context, is the former Buccaneer site. As I mentioned, about 7 acres of developable land. On this map here, we do show the almost 3 acres that were donated back by LNWA as part of their stewardship of the land to the Jekyll Island Authority, though I think our map is perhaps not as clear as Joan's presentation earlier, so I'll let that stand. So the property is located about a half-mile south of the Beach Village Shopping Center and the Convention Center. And so given this proximity to the economic hub of the island, we recognize at the outset of this analysis that any future development here would be quite important in that it would have the opportunity to provide additional support to the retail and businesses on the island and would have a lasting impact on the community. In addition to the number of hospitality uses that are nearby, obviously the Marriott Courtyard and the Days Inn that I already mentioned, there's also a number of residential projects nearby, and I'll start by going through some of the residential findings as part of our study. Just to the south of the site, obviously, is Ocean Oaks, built in 2016, which has seen great success as an example of really the growing residential demand in the Golden Isle, but on Jekyll Island specifically. And then just to the north, the moorings, which is an active project, which has also been quite successful in terms of its ability to deliver homes and sell at a very fast clip, which has been really representative of the performance that we've seen across most of the newer residential products on Jekyll Island, which have done quite well. I mentioned the moorings selling over 23 units per year, but the 2015 and 2016 deliveries of both the cottages and Ocean Oaks, combining to sell at a pace of almost 50 units per year is quite fast and indicative of a residential market that shows very strong demand, which we expect to continue over the course of the coming years as Jekyll Island remains a location that many people find particularly desirable, not only as a place to recreate, but also as a place to live. To highlight the success of that recent community example, the cottages, that brought a little over 120 new construction units, attached homes to the market, saw relatively rapid sales pace and quickly sold out. That mix of buyers that purchased there tended to favor those that were using the property as a rental home, though almost a third were actually primary homeowners, with some indications that that may be a growing share, as we've seen at least anecdotally as a result of the pandemic, as many households accelerate their relocation and retirement plans. And some evidence to suggest also that that's a greater share of primary homeowners than the overall island or other communities on the island. In addition to analyzing that competitive supply, we also conducted a statistical demand analysis, and so that looked at a number of different growth scenarios that looked at projections for the region in terms of single-family permitting and Jekyll Island's historical capture of that market. We also looked at projections for household growth throughout the region and Jekyll Island's capture of that. And we also looked at the growth in tourism on the island and looked at an upside scenario of what demand might look like if that tourism growth continues and can be extrapolated to be considered a proxy for further residential demand. What we found as a result of that was very strong demand for new homes on the island, particularly in the near term, but growing, as I mentioned, as a result of Jekyll Island's continued importance within the region. To quickly summarize this residential component of the study, we expect this strong residential demand to continue. Hospitality or hotel uses, on the other hand, have experienced some recent headwinds, which we're all unfortunately very familiar with the COVID-19 pandemic. which I'll elaborate on in a few more slides. There is obviously a bright spot in that Jekyll Island has performed better than many locations across the country, and there are signs that it is recovering very fast here, though there also has been an influx of new rooms with the delivery of 209 rooms at the Marriott Courtyard and Residence Inn, which I'll also touch on. But as you can see on this chart here, hotel rooms on the island make up over half of all of the units that exist on Jekyll Island. You can see owner-occupied units make up less than a quarter of the total units on the island. The vast majority of units used as rentals, and the majority of that used by hotel keys. There are approximately 1,400 units on the island, as you can see on the following map, and this represents a great diversity of price points, of amenity offerings, target audiences, and that is all to say that Jekyll Island does a great job of being an accessible location which can provide a lot for many people. The most recent of the deliveries on this map that you see here is, of course, the Marriott Courtyard and Residence Inn, which, of course, is likely to be a great benefit to the island, though in any situation when analyzing the supply and demand within a given market, the addition of a significant amount of new supply tends to skew the demand potential moving forward. And as I get into those demand metrics that I mentioned, I'll first highlight some of the historical performance metrics that we've seen on Jekyll Island. Certainly what you see in 2020 is a massive reduction in both occupancy rates as well as average daily rates on hotels. Now again, this is actually a much better performance than many locations across the country. However, there was still an impact having to do, at least initially at the start of the pandemic, with limited travel, though even as Jekyll Island has done very well as a drive-to market with many tourists and visitors coming back, we've continued to see across the country a kind of slow to recover business and corporate stay market, which in many places has kept occupancies down. But what we see even beyond these COVID trends, if we look back historically, are occupancy rates which are typically in the low 60s. That is generally below the range of what we would typically consider to be a benchmark occupancy for a new hotel project, where hotel operators would seek to achieve occupancy rates in the 65% to 70% range in order to be economically successful. And so we would want to see in a market overall stronger occupancy rates to suggest that new hotel product could be absorbed within that market. And so as part of our analysis, we looked at the demand for new hotel rooms on the island by analyzing the historical occupancies and supply of hotel rooms, and making some assumptions based on what we know about how Jekyll has recovered from COVID, that demand would really recover in 2021, 2022 would be another robust year of growth, and that for subsequent years, growth would continue as it had historically. However, what we found even with this growth in demand is that the delivery of the 209 rooms at the Marriott Courtyard and Residence Inn is likely to eat into a lot of this growth in hotel demand, at least for the near term, which results in not enough market support at this time, at least over the coming years, for new hotel product. So with this in mind, it was really a key finding of our research that market demand, particularly in the near term, is likely to be strongest for residential product. Of course, residential supply is already limited on Jekyll Island, despite the addition of new communities and new supply over the past several years. These new delivered projects experienced very strong sales paces, especially for the single-family detached and attached homes. And there likely remains additional pent-up demand for new residential units. Our findings also indicate that residential demand is likely to be much stronger than demand for new hotel units in the near term. There are a number of competing hotels that currently exist on the island, along with the Marriott Courtyard and Residence Inn that recently delivered. And so while we expect Jekyll Island to rebound relatively quickly from the impacts of the pandemic, the large number of competing units makes hospitality and hotel product much more competitive in the near term. Hotel operators, as I mentioned, typically seek that benchmark occupancy of close to 70% for success, and typical occupancies over the past several years being in the low 60s without the additional 209 units from the Marriott Hotel suggests that while the future demand for hotel may be assisted by strong expected growth in leisure demand and the return of group and business travel, another beachfront hotel just recently opened will likely eat into much of the market support for new hotel at this time. With these key findings in mind, we also wanted to consider how the results of that market analysis might impact key capacity environmental considerations for Jekyll Island. From a capacity standpoint, new residential units are typically developed at a significantly lower density than hotel product and a lower intensity, particularly given that lower density hotels are much less feasible from an economic standpoint. They just don't have the same economies of scale needed to succeed as larger hotel footprints. And so residential homes, even if a sizable portion of those homes end up being used as rentals or vacation rentals, it's still likely to produce less overall churn of people, so to say, compared to additional hotel units at much higher density and intensity, which of course has a more significant impact, at least from an environmental standpoint, with a larger building footprint and more churn of new guests than a residential development. In addition to at least the anecdotal idea that owners may also be more likely to become more actively involved in the ecological preservation of their home on Jekyll Island. As I mentioned earlier in my presentation, RCLCO did conduct extensive interviews during this process, meeting with a number of folks that are involved on the island or involved within the Jekyll Island Authority in order to solicit feedback and information that could color the context that we used as part of our market analysis. In general, what we learned was very important to all the stakeholders involved was the idea of balance on the island and ensuring that there remained that balance between the ecological, environmental, and capacity concerns, as well as the need for and the boon that comes from additional investment in the island. And stakeholders were very clear that this was important to them and seemed to line up with some of our findings that the likelihood of meeting the needs of those capacity and ecological and environmental considerations, as well as the needs of stakeholders, would be best met with the development of residential product. And so overall, the results of our market analysis were as follows. First, the market fundamentals, including competitive supply research and projected demand, indicated that residential homes would likely to be the most appropriate land use at the subject site, and more suited for development when compared to traditional hotel units. Second, along with those favorable market dynamics, residential development is also likely to best meet the needs of various stakeholders and carrying capacity considerations and environmental concerns for Jekyll Island. And third, the ultimate organization of those residential units could take multiple shapes. However, the sales pace at recently developed communities on Jekyll Island do indicate that market demand is likely strongest for single-family detached and attached homes. And finally, the development of residential uses sold to private owners or even with the potential for use within a rental pool could act as an important compromise which would benefit the local retail center and potentially even the convention center if used as a rental product. And so in closing, I would just like to thank you very much for your time. If you have any questions, I would be happy to address them.
Mr. Chairman, I do have one or two questions. Very thorough report, and but just making sure that your conclusions are what I understand. First of all, the market analysis says strongest for residential homes detached.
And any identification of density that would be associated with development of this nature?
We did not specifically define a density. We looked at both detached and attached product, and looking at the competitive supply on Jekyll Island, the success of attached units at the cottages was obviously very successful, but also the slightly lower density detached homes on Ocean Oaks were also quite successful as well. And so there's a range of densities which could be successful as part of that residential demand.
Mr. Kruger, do you have any questions? I know you have been involved in this for some time.
I certainly would be interested in seeing a finalized draft of this, because I concur in the usage and would like to see us maintain a density that is appropriate to the property and to the continued growth of the island. I mean, I feel like that I concur with their remarks that residential appears to me to be a better option than multi-room hotels.
So, Mr. Chairman, this report has now been presented for the board consideration. There's no vote or consideration other than to bring the report forward, and then for board members to be able to review it then over the next several weeks. So, Carl, we definitely appreciate your presentation to the board this morning. Mr. Chairman, unless there are other board comments on this, I believe this concludes this presentation, unless, Mr. Curtis, any further word from you? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I'm showing next go to Melissa, Counselor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to support from the board, we are undertaking a code revision project through our partnership with Goodwin Mills and Kaywood. And I would like to introduce and call up Glenn Coyne and Courtney Reich. I should know that by now. I'm sorry, Courtney. These are the folks who are leading through GMC this Herculean project. And they are here today to give you an update of what we have been doing so far.
Well, good morning. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you to the board and the staff. We're happy to be here today to provide an update on this really important project. I'll start by introducing myself and Glenn. My name is Courtney Reich. I am a principal planner with Goodwin Mills and Kaywood. I work in our Savannah office. We also have a Brunswick office here, and one of our stormwater experts is in that office in downtown Brunswick. Glenn Coyne is with us here. He is our Georgia planning lead and leading this project. Our presentation today will be fairly short. We just want to give you an update on the process so far that we are utilizing to update your code. And then we're going to share with you a little bit of the public feedback that we've received so far, gathered both through public meetings as well as through an online survey. And then we'll talk to you also about some of the issues that have been identified, not only through that public involvement, but also in discussions and workshops with your staff. Like I said, we're a GMC, just to give you a brief introduction of us, since this is the first time we're here to present before you. We are a Southeast Regional architecture engineering firm, and we have a fairly large Georgia presence. We have 5 offices throughout Georgia, but your planning team that you see here are located primarily within your Savannah, Augusta, or within the Savannah, Augusta, and Brunswick offices. Meaning we have a lot of connection to this community. We all have spent time here, both professionally and personally, and are very excited to be working here on Jekyll Island. The process that we are utilizing here can be summed up in 2 slides. I'm going to talk to you about what we're doing and what we're not doing. And I think it's important to be clear on both, and perhaps the what we're not doing is the more important part of that statement. But what we are doing is we're updating your code for Jekyll Island. This is the code that guides how development occurs, how it's constructed, how you regulate uses on the island. I think everybody's probably been engaged with your code in one way or another. We're looking at the administrative procedures. It's really time for an overall update of that code. The last time it was updated was 2012, so it's almost 10 years old at this point. And it's time to take a look, crack it open, and see what's working, what's not working for staff and their use with enforcement, as well as what's new. What are the new technologies that we need to address? Things like small cell towers, or new uses, things like short-term vacation rentals, things that weren't necessarily a high priority issue back when this code was written in 2012. So we're looking at some of those issues and making updates based on that. And then we're also looking at a list of key issues. And those key issues are things that were brought to us by the staff at the beginning of this process, and also what we've heard from the public and through our own review of the code and our experience working with codes in other parts of the country, or other parts of the state, really. We have done a lot of work in similar locations, and we're bringing some of that experience to this project. So things that we're not doing. We are not opening up any new areas of Jekyll Island for development. Where development occurs on this island is guided by state law and also by your master plan, which is also currently under update through a separate process that you're engaged with now with the University of Georgia. Those are the guiding documents for development on the island. The code that we have before us and that we are updating simply regulates the way development occurs within those areas already identified. We're not changing any of the current or future land uses proposed within the development areas. And we're of course not advocating any particular political ideology or agenda. So I'm going to turn it over to Glenn Coyne to share with you some of the key issues we've identified already as part of this process.
Thanks, Courtney. Good morning. Again, Glenn Coyne. Typically, we've worked on projects like this throughout the state and other parts of the country, and we're dealing with updating a zoning ordinance or subdivision regulations. And here, Jekyll Island is very unique in that you don't use the Z word, but you do regulate how property is developed and maintained. And so many of the codes that we've looked at deal with, as Courtney pointed out, those aspects. So I'm not going to read every single word on the screen. You can see that, but I want to highlight a few things that we are doing. A lot of what we're doing is just reorganizing what you have. Things appear in the code now in a very disparate way. They're kind of scattered around, and that's really very common. It's not a criticism. It kind of goes in the order that things happened, and this opportunity allows us to come in from the outside and say, okay, we see that these few chapters may conflict with each other, or they may say the same thing twice. And what we're trying to do is streamline the code. So if we leave you with nothing else today, that's our goal, is to try to make this more user-friendly, not only for the staff, but also for the folks that come to the island, live on the island, that are interested in how properties are maintained or renovated. So a lot of that has to do with building codes. The state and the nation and international actually has a set of building codes that are adopted by municipalities and counties, and the authority already has adopted those. And we're just making sure that the most recent codes are the ones that are reflected in the Jekyll Island Code of Ordinances. So we're doing that. The other thing we're doing is clarifying the relationship between the island and Glynn County. You share building inspections, you share permitting. There is a relationship there, and we want to make sure that that gets documented so folks know what to expect, who they should call, and who's going to show up at their property to inspect. Design review guidelines is a very big piece. I'll talk more about that later. Animal control we've heard a lot about. I will stick with the snake theme and let you know that we've not addressed any kind of snake ordinances, so that's new today. But historic preservation is obviously very important. There's a new section we're drafting to pull in how a properties should be preserved, those that are already designated as historic and those that may be designated historic in the future. As a lot of you know, if something is 50 years old or older, it's eligible to be designated as historic, and that puts a lot of areas of the island that were developed 50 years ago or more as potentially historic, so we want to make sure we reflect that. There's a very big section and sections of the code that deal with what we call natural features and environmental resources, and we'd like to make sure that those are combined and collected together so that folks that are interested in those topics can see those in one place. So that's what is happening in this section. We're also bringing in a little more solid waste management. There's some references to it here and there, but we are recommending a littering and a junk ordinance just to make sure that those are clear for folks, that we don't want people coming to the island and doing things we don't want them to do. Then the next two sections are really what gets into the meat of it, dealing with how regulations apply to residential areas, and the next slide will be for commercial areas. But we've heard a lot of feedback from the staff and from the public involvement, which I'll walk through in a minute, about how those guidelines should apply to the residential areas. And I'll give you some details in a minute, but how the design review guidelines work and how those are applied to the residential areas. So we're documenting a lot of that. Also, what we call supplemental uses are being looked at. So short and long-term rentals is a big one as an example for you, and what those standards look like, and most importantly, how people park when they visit those short-term and long-term rentals. And then home occupations, again, with the pandemic, a lot more people are turning to a room or rooms in their home to work out of, and we just want to make sure that that's not done in a way that is in conflict with the primarily residential nature of the property. So. And then again, in the commercial area, there are already standards. We're just making sure that some of these are brought up to the current state of the art. And those include sanitation and grease is a very big one. We want to make sure that, again, environmentally and ecologically, everything is being done to protect the island while those businesses are operating, and making sure we're not hurting that. Also, we've taken a look at what happens to folks who come to the island to do business but aren't located on the island. And this is tricky because, as you know, with the state park and the not being a regular city or county government, you're a little bit limited. So Melissa's done some really good research with the AG's office, Attorney General's office, and we're looking at what we can do to regulate, in lieu of a business license, a way to regulate folks that come onto the island for a tour or a charter or catering or events or things like that. So we're working with Melissa on identifying how to best control that. And then finally, again, under the organization section, pulling things together that deal with accessory or temporary uses. So we're talking about walls and fences, any accessory buildings and signage. There's been a few court cases recently that deal with how you can regulate signs in the state of Georgia and in the US. And we want to make sure the sign ordinance is consistent with those findings. And then finally, the administrative chapter is really just that. Instead of having administrative tasks scattered throughout the ordinance that people have to hunt and find for, we're putting those together in one place so that if somebody needs a permit or wants to make a change to their property, they can see what those procedures are and who they need to contact to take care of that. So moving quickly into public involvement, we have right now, as of now, we have 3 interactions planned. There may be more, but we did have a public meeting back on July 15th here at the Convention Center, and it was really an introduction of this, very similar to some of the information we're providing you today. But we had 20 folks show up, which was a pretty good turnout. We had a lot of comments that we received. I'll talk about those in a second. The second thing was an online survey that we did for about 2.5 weeks at the end of August, and we received 38 responses to that, and I'll summarize those results for you. And then once we have the draft codes pulled together, which is forthcoming, we're looking at another public meeting to present those, and that will happen either in November or December. We haven't set a date for that yet, but there will be one more chance for folks to see what those draft revisions look like. And then, of course, we'll bring it back to you for the approval process of getting the codes adopted. So the first public meeting that we had back in August, we received a lot of comments. I'm only summarizing a few of them here for you today. It was interesting that when we had the meeting, it was about a week after the condo collapse in Florida that happened, the really horrible accident. And so it was on people's minds, structural integrity of buildings, and also with some storm activity and storm events along the coast. So people were very concerned about making sure that the buildings on the island are being regularly inspected to make sure that there's not a hazard for collapse. And so that's a pretty bad thing to talk about, but it's an important thing, and we want to make sure that that's incorporated into the inspections. People were concerned that if we change a code, would it impact them today? So if they're legal today and something in the code were to change, they're still okay if they make no changes. And that's typically referred to as grandfathered in, but the actual term is legal non-conforming. So if you're legal today and something that the code does changes it, it doesn't impact you unless you go to make a major change. So we wanted to let people know that that's not something to be worried about. We heard a lot about residential neighborhoods and the amount of rental houses that are popping up, and most often we heard about the concern about parking on grass, parking in the street, and parking on adjacent properties, and making sure that we have a way to regulate the number and location of cars parked at a rental property. Again, I mentioned design guidelines a minute ago. We did hear a couple of folks were concerned and wanted us to bring forward to the authority that they felt like that the design review group would benefit from additional public involvement. I don't know exactly how the procedure works, but there was a feeling among the folks, at least that attended the public meeting, that that process could be a little more open and that people could hear about those applications and have an opportunity to comment. So that's something we were bringing forward. And then we did hear quite a bit about animal control, specifically feral cats, and the need to address that issue and other wildlife and pet control. And we have drafted a chapter which is being reviewed by the staff that deals with animal control. And then the online survey. Again, I mentioned that it was open from August 23rd to September 3rd. We kept it very brief. It was available online, so it's not a scientific survey at all. Anybody who wanted to participate could through access through the website. Again, we kept it short, and we received about 38 responses over that time. And what we really tried to do was find out how much people know about the codes today, how interested they are in the codes, and then maybe get an idea of what future use of the codes might be. Are people planning anything that would cause them to interact with the codes? So the first question was really demographics. What's your relationship to Jekyll Island? And you can see that we received, the majority of the folks are people who are here full-time or certainly long-term subtenants. So that was almost half the folks. And then 14 people who are their second home or investment property. We did not hear from any of the business folks on this particular survey. 4 visitors, and then 1 person who works on the island. And if you're fast, you see that this adds up to 39. You were allowed to pick more than one. So if you lived here and worked here, for example, you could have selected both of those. So we asked people to give us open-ended. We said, what are the 3 things that you think about that should be addressed in the code? And we did put that phrase, not already included, but most of these are in fact included. But we asked them what they thought. Overwhelmingly, the number 1 answer was to make sure we limit future overdevelopment of the island. And again, as Courtney pointed out, we are not changing anything about the map that demonstrates where you can develop or not develop. But again, I think if there's redevelopment of properties, we want to make sure that the code limits the overdevelopment. Parking, we heard about parking in many areas, and you can see the enumeration there. Code enforcement, there was a few comments that we received from folks about their interaction with code enforcement. And again, this is kind of the Jekyll Island staff versus the Glynn County staff, and not really sure who they're supposed to be talking to. So it's very clear to me. I think the website is pretty clear. The guidance that's given by the staff is clear, but there might be something that we can do, again, to enhance that a little bit. Traffic, people were complaining about traffic. The report today gave the number of vehicles that are visiting the island. It's growing, and the people that are here are concerned about the traffic and overdevelopment causing more traffic. And then again, being on the coast, stormwater and flooding was brought up by a lot of folks as a question. Then similarly, we asked them what they thought should be revised in the current code. It's some of the same issues. Again, I don't want to repeat, but we saw the same things coming up again about concerns over overdevelopment, parking and outdoor storage in residential areas was an issue. The other unique thing about Jekyll Island is through the leases that you have the ability to control some of the land uses and development through the leases as well as through the codes. And folks thought that that was a good thing, and that should be something that as the leases are renegotiated, that those limitations are placed on the leases as well as in the codes. And then people on the property maintenance, it was a two-edged sword. They wanted to make sure that people were required to maintain their property and that those codes were strictly enforced. But when it came to them, they wanted to be able to trim a bush or a tree or a limb without having to go through a whole rigmarole process. So it was a very interesting dichotomy there, but that's very typical. And again, I mentioned before the public comment and review, and I noticed every item today, you've asked for public comment and have an opportunity for people to participate, and I think that that's good. The final couple of questions, we really just wanted to have people rank what topics were most important to them, and so this was a grid where you could choose 1 through 5 and you ranked these down. So the highest response we got was to regulate the design and location of any new development, and that's through your master plan, which we are not working on, but is being updated, and also through application of the codes. The next one was, the next most popular one was protecting the character of the single-family neighborhoods, making sure that the single-family neighborhoods remain that way. And then third was conservation and sustainability, along with historic preservation. Next, environmental and conservation were very high on people's minds, making sure that this special place remains just that. And then we were a little surprised that maintenance of trees and landscaping came in 5th, but it did, and I think people may just feel like that's already being done, and they didn't want to rank that higher than some of the others, but that's the way that the rankings fell out. Then what we wanted to do in the last 2 questions was determine demand, basically. Do you expect to have to deal with these codes yourself in the next few years? So we asked over the next 3 years, are you planning to do any kind of alterations to your property? And again, you could see most of the people really aren't planning to do very much to their properties, or they're not really sure. But of the 37 folks who responded to this question, 10 of them, about a third, a little less than a third of them, think that they're going to do something with their property where they'll have to interact with the codes. And so we drilled down on that a little bit and said, well, what do you think you're going to do? And are you going to change landscaping? Are you going to do an addition? Are you going to? And so again, you can see there, most of the folks are going to do something with their landscaping, and only one of the respondents that participated in the survey had a plan to really do something that required a traditional building permit. So I think folks aren't really going to have to deal very much with the code, but it's something that's important, as Melissa said, for us to update. So in closing, I just wanted to let you know our schedule. We got started in this project back in May, and we had a fantastic staff workshop all day here and learned a tremendous amount about Jekyll Island and the current situations. And from that, we went and did a bunch of research and best practices and brought that together. And we're currently in the window drafting the revisions. We've got several chapters that are completed drafts. We have several we're still working on. And that's a back and forth between us and the staff to review those drafts before we bring those to you. The current schedule is for that to be brought just after the first of the year back to the authority for the official first and second readings of the code. And we'll have a chance to review those with you before that time comes. And again, along the bottom is just a summary again of the public involvement that we've had and that we plan to have throughout the project. So again, everything that we're doing is being posted on the website at this address. We're trying to be as transparent as possible. And the final thing I really want to say is how much we've enjoyed working with Melissa and working with the rest of the staff. This can be a really difficult process, but We've enjoyed every minute of it and continue to, and we can't wait to get it finished and bring it back to you for adoption. So I don't know where Courtney went, but with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions, or through Melissa, you can let us know if you have other issues that we didn't touch on that you think are important for us to look at.
Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. As you can see, we are working hard. I appreciate everything GMC is doing. A lot of work is going into this, and we will be posting a summary of the survey results on our website this week for the public review. Do you have any questions? Nope. Thank you very much, Glenn and Courtney.
Thank you all. Unless I go back to you,
We are at the request for approval of emergency and disaster mutual aid agreement, and that would be Noel Jensen.
No. And this is Dennis?
Good morning. I have our Director of Public Safety, Dennis Gailey, here in case you have any specific questions. The Glenn County Board of Commissioners has established a Glenn Unified Command to serve as command and control for emergency services during the McMichael Bryan trials wrapped around the Ahmaud Arbery case. As part of this process, JIMA has taken over with the Unified Command and intends to have outside agencies from Camden and Effingham, and they asked Jekyll Island also to participate, to stand by in case they are overwhelmed in the city or the county with as far as emergency services. So with these requests, it's best practices to have agreements in place, and JIMA is asking for us to execute a statewide mutual aid assistance agreement. And this assistance agreement is before you for approval, and it's been reviewed by Melissa, and staff recommends approval of the agreement as presented. This agreement also allows us, if we act in response to this specific event, that we could be reimbursed for our labor and anything associated with the equipment that we use. And one clarification I will make is they're not asking us to do anything except fill in for them if Glenn County has to respond to an issue downtown, or if the city has an issue downtown. We would backfill where they left from. So for example, exit 29, if they had to send the fire engine from exit 29 to go respond to a fire, we would go to exit 29. They're not specifically asking us to respond to any incidents that would happen in the city or the county specifically. If you have any further questions, Dennis is also here, available for you.
I'm going to need a motion. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve as presented.
I'm sorry?
I'll give you a motion to approve as presented.
Well, that'd be terrific. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, discussion. All righty. All those in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, like sign? Motion carries.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Jones, I think we go to the letter sent to Glenn County Board of Elections.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. In your packets is a copy of the letter the board received in advance. It was written on October the 7th from me to Chris Channel regarding the Glenn County elections board redistricts that are being proposed. And basically, this letter advocates that the Board of Elections, as well as the County Commission, consider as an alternative to Jekyll Island not being part of the Islands District, that would be St. Simons and Sea Island, that we would be part of the county district that would be the district serving, as Noel just mentioned, exit 29, which of course is where we have emergency service agreements. We also, that is the DOT exit to Jekyll Island. Also, elementary school children from Jekyll Island are assigned to the Satilla Marsh elementary school at that exit. And most of our utilities come from that direction as well through the Georgia Power infrastructure. So there are many reasons why we would have an affinity with that portion of the county. Members of the County Commission, as well as all members of the Jekyll Island Authority Board, received this letter. Noel and I did attend the hearing on October the 12th with the, or the meeting on October the 12th with the Board of Elections Supervisor Board. And then this particular issue now goes before the County Commission for consideration. I am told by some of the county commissioners that there may be some changes that they would propose that would continue to have Jekyll in a modified district with St. Simons. So we don't know how that may end up, but we have had a conversation with most all of the county commissioners regarding this letter. And your requested action today is actual formal public ratification of this letter, Mr. Chairman.
Which will require a motion.
Yes, sir.
Is there a motion to recommend ratification of letter sent from Glenn County Board of Elections and Commissioners regarding redistricting maps as recommended by staff?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. And now discussion. All right, I'm going to call for a vote. All in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, like sign. Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, can we have clarification? I think Mr. Willard is now on the line.
Mr. Willard, are you on the line?
Yes, I'm still.
All right.
Yes, I am.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Tripp Tollison, have you joined us? He's not on the line. Chairman, you may continue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, I'm going to this retail operations update. Brian O'Neill.
Hi, I'm Brian O'Neill, the Director of Retail Operations. I want to quickly take you through Jekyll Island's retail sales over the past few years, because they're awesome. Since COVID, 2021 and 22 have brought some difficult challenges. Product shortages, we have companies that are running out of shirts, toys, accessories. It seems like everything we order is being substituted or now on back order. We're experiencing ridiculously long wait times for products. We're not only waiting weeks now, we're waiting months. In the past 9 years I've been on Jekyll, 90% of the products that we order have a 2 to 4 week turnaround. Today, printed bags are taking 6 months. T-shirts are taking more than 2 months. Everything we thought we knew about ordering has changed since COVID. Increased cost of merchandise and shipping. We've seen a dramatic increase in our cost of goods sold. Freight prices have doubled over the past year. To compensate for these increases, we have been forced to raise our retail prices to offset these additional costs. Employee shortages. Over the past year and a half, finding quality help has been extremely difficult. With the recent changes in our pay structure, thank you, Jenna, Marjorie, and Jones, we're hoping to see this employee shortage become a thing of the past. Unplanned massive increases in sales. Actually, this is kind of a great problem to have if you can manage to overcome it. This past summer, I was convinced that the Georgia Sea Turtle Center and Life is Good would completely run out of product. It's difficult to predict 60% increases over budget during the summer months and still have anything left to sell. We've had some outstanding performances by many of our shops, but I would like to highlight just a few of them. The Georgia Sea Turtle Center continues to crush budgeted numbers. It's doubled in volume since 2013. Last year, we increased 31% over budget on very heavy volume. The 2021 year produced the highest volume day, week, month, and year. We even surpassed the monthly goal in July of this year when we put $265,000 up. The GSTC closed the year with $1.4 million in sales. This number doesn't include the $969,000 that Marina's gift shop rang up for admissions. It's just retail sales numbers. We were 53% above last year's sales. The GSTC manager, Marina, gained $481,000 over the 2020 year, while being $21,000 under budgeted payroll, $16,000 under operating expenses, and $300,000 over the budgeted net income. We were also $300,000 over the perfect year of 2019, which is what I like to call it. When we had shrimp and grits, there were no hurricanes and no ice storms and no COVID. We desperately need a larger shop with a better flow and with more storage options. Despite being handicapped on size, I fully expect that Marina will be very close to $2 million by the end of this June. The Jekyll Island Campground Store. They recorded the highest volume they've ever had since 2010. But 2010 and prior, the campground sales also included the bait shop at the pier. In 2021, we were $52,000 over budget at a 63% increase. This is one of the only two shops that actually made budget in 2020, the other being Life is Good. They were up 46% over last year's sales and gained $43,000 over the 2020's actual sales. This location desperately needs to be remodeled, which I know that's in the works, but every day we seem to be making improvements in the product selection and it's starting to pay off. I believe that Ronnie and his assistant Kimberly will have this location around $175,000 by the end of June. Life is good. It really is. If you're not shopping here often, you're really missing out. This location reminds me every day of why I chose retail as a career. I smile every time I walk into this store. It's full of optimism and great customer service. The manager, Laura Lee, and her team lead, Grace, are motivated, driven by sales, and they're always looking for ways to improve everything from product selection to displays to, more importantly, sales. All the product is planned and ordered a year in advance for this location. 12 months ago, there was never a plan in place that Life is Good would gain 59% over budget. Laura Lee should be commended for using every tool at her disposal to maintain a sufficient level of inventory to achieve these numbers. In 21, we were $201,000 over budget at 59% increase in sales. Number 2 volume store out of all the JIA locations, and Life is Good has also moved into one of the top performing Life is Good locations in all of the country. As you can see, $540,000 was a substantial increase over 2020 and the perfect year, 2019. In 2020, this location was closed for 32 days for COVID, yet it still managed to make budgeted sales and beat last year's sales. We gained $191,000 for an impressive 55% over 2020 sales. I can easily see an additional $100,000 increase in sales by the end of June, but if you ask Laura Lee, she's not going to be happy until she beats the Turtle Center. All retail sales year-end results. I've already mentioned record-setting performances from the Georgia Sea Turtle Center, Campground, and Life is Good, but we had 4 other locations to set all-time sales records. The guest information finished with $391,000, a 25% increase over last year, with no shrimp and grits revenue. The Golf Pro Shop did $389,000, picked up $144K for a 59% increase over 2020. The Little Store, as we call it, Remember When, in the Historic District, only did $82,000, but that was an increase of 47% or $26,000 over the prior year. We're looking for $100K for that little store at the end of June. Summer Waves didn't get their all-time record, but I'm going to mention them anyway. They came in at $144,000 with an 87% increase over 2020. We missed the record, the all-time record, by $1,400. And I'm still not very happy about it, and I could explain why that happened, but we're gonna get it this year by the end of June, no doubt. Overall, retail added $1.1 million in sales over the COVID 2020 year, but probably a better comparison is the $700,000 increase that we put over the perfect year of 2019. I think $4 million is possible this year. And the increase in sales continued. This chart is July through September. The Turtle Center has already done $500,000 this year, and they're up 90% and $260,000 over budget. That store is a monster. Life is Good continues its impressive run, 50% over budget so far, and looking forward to another spectacular year. Again, I have no doubt Summer Waves opens back up. The little gift shop will set its record there. And with all stores currently 50% over budget, it is possible we will gain another $1 million in sales by the end of this year. Our goals for 22. Continue to improve customer service standards in all of our retail locations. The success and our future depends on it. Continue to add more made in the United States products along with recycled products into our shops. Complete my never-ending search for employees that are sales-driven and motivated to deliver exceptional customer service. I will do $100,000 in 3 days at Shrimp and Grats. I would like to thank each of you for this opportunity over the past 9.5 years. It's been the most rewarding position I've ever held. We still have a lot of work to do, but I am excited to see what the future brings. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Mr. Chairman, you can tell that Brian has no enthusiasm and no excitement for retail whatsoever. I would like to say, in spite of his dismal personality, some way, we have excelled and outperformed every single goal that he has set. And if you ever want to really see Brian perform, all you have to do is give him a challenge, and then he will shove it in your face. I promise you that, because he's done that to me on several times. Brian, you do a great job, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next is the Executive Director's report. Jones Hooks.
Mr. Chairman, in the interest of time, I'll be as quick as possible moving through several items. As you're aware, Mr. Chairman, because you attended, the master plan public hearing was held on October the 14th, and there is information regarding that in your blue folders. One of the items that we reviewed during that public meeting that was presided over by the University of Georgia was a review of all of the various Jekyll Island studies that are underway at the present time, and how the historical studies are connected to the master plan. That particular briefing document is in your blue folders as well. There's also a letter from Georgia DOT regarding concerns that we had after the recent paving on 17 and the way that the Jekyll Causeway entrance was left. Once we brought that to DOT's attention, they were there immediately, and there's been some improvements made there, but there are still some additional improvements with striping and other issues that they will be addressing through their contractor on that project. There's also an update in your folder as far as an annual golf championship by the state of Georgia. The golf maintenance folks, they're going to be holding a tournament here on Jekyll Island the 12th through the 14th. And then I want to share with you very quickly some updates as far as some pictures, befores and afters. This first one is the new playground over at the Red Bug Pizza area, the mini golf area, and you'll see the before and the after. Unfortunately, this slide, the before, does not show the metal corrosion and the danger that the consultants pointed out to us that kids were experiencing as far as some of the splintering and that sort of thing. And so it's hard to see that in detail, but the real proof in this project is that we've received several comments from grandparents and parents where their kids have been to the new playground and loved it. And we've gotten pictures, and so we think that it's proven to be quite a good addition. Of course, this was something you approved in the new budget, and Noel and Dana have made this happen since the first of the year. Also, you're aware that we had to basically abandon the crossover at Corsair Park for a time because of the movement of sand. And while that crossover was originally designed to be an ADA compliant crossover, it was lost to nature. And so we received the permits to go back and redo the crossover, which you see the before pictures and the after pictures here as far as that crossover is now operational. There is a sign there to point out the nearest ADA, which is the Beach Village crossover. And so we obviously think that's very important, but this was a losing battle in this particular location. The next slide. This project is over at Chakotah Ruins. You've heard that our historic preservation folks have been redoing that area. It was a dangerous area as far as some of the pipes and some of the actual indoor pool that was part of that cottage originally. That has all been done away with and changed in accordance with state historic preservation, and tiles that are either original or very similar to original tiles have been installed. And the best picture that we had for before and after is, if you look at the lines on the left-hand side, you see what they look like, and then you see what they look like now. And I must let everybody know you do not bleach these items. So if you have something similar at home, do not bleach it. Our preservation folks tell me that you have to use special solutions in order to not damage these particular statues. So anyway, it's definitely a venue worth visiting now, and it's a great improvement over what we did have there. And then bike path replacements. Noel has been extremely involved in this, he and Dana, all of these projects. Noel, we now have improved about 3 miles of bike paths since the first of the new fiscal year. And you see the befores and afters, so a great improvement there. The mini golf area was in desperate need of new, quote, turf. So new carpet has been installed, and that's another project that Noel has headlined in order to make it happen on a quick schedule. And finally, one of my favorite projects, one that I only taught Cliff, how many years? About 12 years about getting this done. Anyway, the little pond that was by the golf course on Captain Wiley was it's basically a holding pond, but I had felt for some time that it could be so much more. And Cliff has had the designs for years, but then through the foundation, both this project and the Chakota project were funded by a donor, and so we were able to this year, Cliff and his team go in and totally transform that little pond. And so now when you pass by there, rather than it just being a holding pond, you look and it's just a really nice site and a nice venue. So I'm very, very pleased. Cliff, thank you for your work on that. And Mr. Chairman, at this time, Noel, would you or Dennis like to make a special presentation? Is that not going to happen? Is that not happening today? My notes said firefighter of the year. Okay, if he's not here, then can we hold that, Dennis, until next month? Okay, great. Let's do that. And Mr. Chairman, I should have noted in the master plan public hearing that you know that the draft plan has been sent in accordance with state policy or procedures forward to the Oversight Committee. And at this point, I had communication with Lee this morning from UGA, and she and her team are in the midst of taking the public comments from the hearing the other night and also the comments that have been received since then, and they are drafting a summary that will become part of the document and will also be shared with board members and posted to the public, and so that is under draft now.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Chairman's comments, I'll just be very brief and just say once again, I can't say enough great things about Team Jekyll. This authority staff, top to bottom, I just can't thank you all enough. I'm going to open the floor for public comment. We'll limit it to 3 minutes for each person. Oh, please, if you come up, give us your information.
Good morning, Mindy Egan, Initiative to Protect Jekyll Island and Jekyll Resident. Since 1971, there's been concern, and it was codified on concern about development on Jekyll, and was codified in the 6535 rule, and then the JIA in 2014 refined that with the limitation on acreage. What hasn't been considered to this point is how to handle redevelopment of developed areas. So specifically, the biggest area on the island would be the golf courses. The capacity study did an amazing job of pointing out what we all knew, but carrying it so much further. And you all have really adopted that in word and commitment verbally. I think based on that, what was baffling to people is to have the master plan update not take that to the next logical conclusion, either through recommending a capacity plan for the island that would look at redevelopment of developed areas. Most importantly, because the golf course master plan is under consideration, which deals with redevelopment of developed land. So you have sort of like these things clashing. There was a lot of concern in the stakeholders meeting, which I was a part of, about that. And those were concerns were brought up, but did not appear to go anywhere since they didn't appear in the draft, other than making recommendations of mitigation of capacity concerns, which you all had a great job with that, with some of the areas and recommendations that were taken into account. So, public has spoken loudly and said, well, it's time to look at that. It's time to really sit down and address that, and don't bypass it in this master plan. As the marketing team pointed out, and the developers here are aware, there's a big demand for residential development. The golf courses is a big chunk of 400 acres that might handle that. You might do the right thing that you talk about, but what's going to happen to the people sitting in your chair next year or the year after? Something has got to be addressed specifically and carefully about redevelopment of development areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Mindy. Anyone else? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and open the October 19, 2021 board meeting of the Jekyll Island Authority, and we will now call the roll.
Yes, sir. Mr. Joseph B. Wilkinson Jr.
Here.
Mr. Bob Kruger. Mr. Bob Kruger, are you on the line?
Here.
Mr. Bill Gross.
Here.
Commissioner Mark Williams. Commissioner Williams, are you on the line? Not currently present. Ms. Joy Birch Meeks.
Here.
Mr. Tripp Tollison. Not currently on the line. Dr. Buster Evans.
Here.
Mr. Glenn Willard.
Here.
Mr. Dale Atkins.
Here.
Sir, you have a quorum.
Great, thank you. Next, I'm going to go to, I need a motion to approve the minutes of the September 21, 2021 board meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
So moved.
Second? I need a second.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All those in favor of the motion to approve the minutes of September 21, 2021, board meeting of the minutes, all those in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Okay. Next, I have the board members have received a committee of the whole recommendation to approve the emergency and disaster mutual aid agreement with the city of Brunswick and Glenn County. Any further discussion before we call? All right. We do not need a motion or a second. Any discussion? All in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any opposed, like sign. Motion carries. The next is the ratification letter sent to Glenn County Board of Elections and Commissioners regarding redistricting maps. Board members have received the committee of the whole recommendation to ratify the letter sent to Glenn County Board of Elections and Commissioners regarding redistricting maps. Is there any further discussion before a vote? Don't need a motion or a second. Any discussion? All those in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Open the floor for any public comment. For a minute. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded that we adjourn. And I am showing 11:38 on Tuesday, October 19th. And,
Chairman, can we have a quick vote on the motion to adjourn? Is there anyone opposed to adjourning? Okay, thank you.
Very good.
we
All
are
those opposed,
adjourned.
just stay the rest of the day. I think we need to expand retail.
I wish we'd get somebody who's excited.